and welcome to the Merri-Cast, the show that puts you on the fast track to business confidence. My guest this week is the amazing Rachel Turner. She's author of the Founder's Survival Guide, which was shortlisted for a Business Book Award earlier this year, and she's a very successful entrepreneur. Her story is an amazing helter-skelter ride through the music industry, through entrepreneurial burnout and redemption, how she found a better self-realization through coaching, and now following her passion every day as a co-founder of the VC Talent Lab. She's got an incredible story, so let's hear it.
I was on a gap year way back in the day, and I talked my way into an unpaid job for a record company, and I did a really good job, and they ended up asking me to be a director of a subsidiary company of theirs just before my 19th birthday. So I didn't go back to university, and I spent the first 8 years of my life working in the music industry, and I set up 5 different companies, an artist management company, a record label publishing company, and I was always very good at the startup phase, but when it came to scale up, which I will talk about a little bit later, I could never really do it. And I just didn't know why. I felt like I was really good at kind of getting an idea for a business, getting initial clients, getting the initial sales, getting a product, building a team. And as soon as I got to about 12 people in a team, it just all toppled over.
Yeah.
And so I was fascinated by that. So when I was 26 and I left the music industry, I was very stressed, very unhappy, really burnt out as an entrepreneur. So I went to university and studied applied psychology, and then came across the coaching profession in its very early days. So I think I was about the 30th person to certify as an executive coach in the UK back in about 99. And I loved it. It felt like I'd been given life's missing instruction manual, and I suddenly understood why I had been falling down all the time before. And so, as a lot of us do, I think, in my industry, we become passionate about helping people who are struggling with what we've struggled with. And so I set my coaching practice up in 2000 and have spent the last 23 years as an executive coach, largely coaching founders, entrepreneurs. And then about 5 years ago, recognized that within that ecosystem of self-employed people, founders, entrepreneurs, there's a small subset who are backed by venture capital. And the journey that they go on is really quite different than you'd go on if you're a self-employed person bootstrapping your growth. And they're really expected to have this extraordinary uplift in growth. They're supposed to turn from being, a kind of scrappy entrepreneur with 15 staff to a corporate CEO with 1,000 staff in a matter of years. And the venture capital ecosystem historically has done a lot to support founders with things like operations, hiring, go-to-market strategy, but it's done a really poor job historically of helping founders develop leadership skills. So 4 years ago, we set up VC Talent Lab. My business partner and I set up VC Talent Lab to try to put leadership development at the heart of the venture ecosystem. So now we have a team of people who work with founders from a variety of different funds across the world, helping founders to become CEOs, helping leadership teams to become high performing, helping emerging corporate cultures become effective. And then last year I wrote and published, my book was published. It was called The Founder's Survival Guide, which really is a bit of a kit bag of tools that are helpful to you, whether you're at the startup stage, you with an idea and a load of fear, whether you're at the scale up stage, you with some money and a product, but no idea how to grow it, or you at the grown up stage where suddenly you're supposed to be this strategic visionary CEO of a large organization, and it's quite tricky.
Yeah, and that's a sort of fantastic introduction to sort of where you've been and your journey. I'm going to take a little step back, if I may. I'm just interested in terms of the early stage of that journey. When you went into the music industry, was it about passion for the music, initially, or were you thinking this is a good chance to try out some entrepreneurial things? Well, in your mind, were you consciously an entrepreneur, or did you just sort of fall into it?
No. And I think I had an easier journey into entrepreneurship than others, because I don't know what research there is about the genetics of entrepreneurship, but there is definitely a risk profile and a bravery / stupidity / fearlessness, which is quite difficult to engineer. And I've just always been one of those people who would chuck myself off the side of a cliff and work out how I was going to land afterwards. And I grew up with that. My dad is an entrepreneur. So, whether that's genetic or learned, I don't know. but I definitely wasn't a thoughtful entrepreneur. If I could go back, I would say my thinking was probably twofold. I had a job and I thought everyone I worked for was an idiot. And I would have done anything not to have to go into work anymore. So working for myself seemed like a good idea. And I joined the music industry in 1988. And for those of your listeners who are into the history of music, that was the explosion of house music. And I was a very, very early adopter of house music. And it was this small little clique of about 500 people who were fascinated by what had happened in Ibiza in the summer of love. And we wanted to take the message around the world. So it was an absolute passion play.
That's amazing in itself. But anyway, you started working as an entrepreneur, and you talked about these successive ventures and about how you couldn't get beyond a certain point. I mean, later resolved by sort of greater self-awareness, if you like, through coaching and then going on to helping other people. What was it that was, do you now understand what it was that was stopping you developing further? And what was that?
I'm going to preface this next comment by about having written a book is saying, well, in my book, because I just think it sounds so self-congratulatory. So I that way, but in the book, so that startup phase is entrepreneurial leadership. So it is opportunity spotting, building a network, risk appetite, confidence, ability to sell, chocolate to the Easter Bunny. It's all those things. And then as the business grows, when you get to the point where you've got a product that works, you've got a service that works, and you want to now grow it, that style of leadership, that entrepreneurial leadership, what we call in the book brave warrior, that stops being helpful, because the traditional classic brave warrior, if you think about it, monomaniacal goal focus, fearless, will make anything, like you tell a warrior to go take the gun turret and they will do or die trying. And that's the energy that really helps in the startup phase. As you get to grown up to scale up, at that point, your job as a founder is to build the business. Now you've got a product that people want. You've got some early clients. You've got more work than you can deliver. Now the question is, can you build a business that will deliver that? So can you get other people delivering the work? Can you deliver the product or service without you being involved? Because if your business is just you winning some work to deliver yourself, you don't have a business, you're self-employed. A business happens when the business itself has a value over and above the work you do in it. So if you took a year off, the business would still win business, have products, sell things. So that stage of moving from being self-employed to scaling an actual business, where really you're thinking about systems and processes, you're thinking about the team, how you elicit high performance from the team of people, how you train people up, how you get them involved. If you try to do that from a brave warrior mindset, it's a disaster, because what that scale up stage needs is more what we call considered architect leadership, which is almost thinking of the business like a blueprint. So what are the systems and processes? How do we deliver the work? How do I hire great people? How do I onboard them? How do I make sure they're working really well together? And that requires a kind of leader who is thoughtful, really thinking about processes and systems and people and coaching. And warriors are pretty bad at all that stuff. They just hit stuff on the head with a sword and hope it works. And so the very things that make you very good as a brave warrior, i.e. risk, speed, sell chocolate to Easter Bunny, do anything to win the business, that all becomes very confusing at the scale up stage. And what you end up is, one founder with lots of gophers around them and trying to do all the work in total chaos. So
were you this brave but confused warrior? In those early ventures, are you describing yourself there at that point?
Exactly
right.
That.
Okay.
So I didn't know how to hire people. I didn't know how to structure roles and responsibilities. I didn't know how to onboard people. I didn't know how to give people feedback. I didn't know how to coach them on performance. I didn't know how to run effective team meetings. I just didn't know how to manage. And, once you're out of startup phase, you need to learn to manage.
So we'll be coming on to these various stages. That you were talking also about starting VC Talent Lab with your co-founder. And so that came naturally out of out of your sort of experience from coaching, with this self-realization through coaching and then helping others and then focusing on this particular niche, in the venture capital market?
I must admit, it was still pretty much a passion play. We should probably point out that there's a third stage to that scale up journey.
Yeah.
And I'll mention it because it's why the business partner and I work together. Once you've been scaling your business, so if you succeed in that scale up journey, you get to a point probably when you've got 400, 500 staff where you need to suddenly become the CEO. So you need to stop managing and you need to start leading. And that style of leadership, which is very strategic, very visionary, very compelling, things about culture, risks to the business, that style of leadership we call, which is a traditional leadership as you'd see it written about in business literature, we call that wise monarch. So there's these three styles: brave warrior, considered architect, wise monarch. And actually, it's a bit false to say that you move from one to the other, because the scale-up journey is much messier than that. And often you're dialing between the three styles all the time. The reason I mention that is that I would say that my journey over the last 20 years personally has been, I call myself a recovering warrior, and I have learnt to architect. I'm not a good monarch. We'll talk about this a little bit later, I'm sure, but a lot of my weaknesses are in that monarch space. My business partner is a brilliant monarch, but not such a good warrior. So we always jokingly say that I midwife founders from warrior to architect, and then he midwives them architect to monarch.
Right. So that's sort of helpful, and that's good. That's a good thing, when you're in a business with somebody that they've got strengths that you don't have, and vice versa. I mean, the coaching side, your kind of coaching moment where you said you fell in love with coaching. I mean, and so what was it about that? Was it the fact that it kind of gave you so much more self-awareness, or was it the help that you could then give other people? I mean, what was it? I mean, you're going to say it's both, I'm sure, but I'm just interested that the initial, what's the sort of the driving motivation that's kept you doing that?
So I think I can answer that in two ways. What attracted me and then what's kept me. So interestingly, what attracted me, I don't think it was either of those. It wasn't solve myself or help others. It was, I knew that I wanted to work in personal development. I knew that. And I knew as soon as I left the music industry, I want to understand how we tick and how to be more successful and how to stop people hitting their own glass ceilings or self-sabotaging and blowing things up the way I had just have. But it was very limited what was available in that space in the 1990s. So I did this degree in applied psychology, and I was like, none of it felt very applicable. It was like, why does the eye see the triangle as a triangle? Why do dogs salivate when you ring a bell? And I was like, that doesn't help me, I was a little bit, one of the courses on organizational psychology I was a bit interested in, but there was nothing on coaching. And really in the 90s, you had therapy and then you had consulting. There was nothing that sat in the middle. So if you think of therapy and consulting being helping industries that sit on either end of a spectrum. And then I remember the day I saw an article in a women's magazine about the emergence of coaching, and it had a picture of an office door, and it had all these titles of what roles the coach played, and it was advisor, strategist, therapist, well-being consultant. And I remember seeing this picture and thinking, that's it, that's what I want to do. And it was the application of psychology, but to help people who were not unwell, but to help people who are not in psychological distress, but help them become more effective. And so I just knew as soon as I saw it, and I signed up to the 2-year course within an hour. And so that's the answer to the first. Your second question about what keeps me here. I have the best job in the world. There's no two ways about it. I get to, clients come to me because they've got a problem they want to fix. I get to be really curious and swim in their world. I get to share a curated subset of knowledge of things, of tools and ways of thinking from the last 26 years of my own research that I think will help them flatten the learning curve. And then I get to see them just do the most extraordinary things. I mean, my clients are confidential, but I wish I could tell you, because they're so frigging, and I say that, can we say frigging? They're so amazing. The stuff they're doing in the world is unbelievable.
Yeah.
And the fact that I can play even the tiniest role in that just makes me jump out of bed in the morning skipping, really.
Fantastic. We were talking in the preamble in the build up to this recording about two types of questions about having the confidence to start, a business, and then there's a whole different sort of area about sort of the toolkit you need to actually sort of expand and develop. Let's deal with both of those two things in turn. I mean, the image that you present of an entrepreneur is a sort of, you've described them as a sort of warrior and so on. Do you think all entrepreneurs? Sorry, yeah, go on.
Can I just clarify that?
Yeah.
No, the style of leadership that's going to be helpful to you when you start a business is brave warrior.
Okay.
So if you're not a brave warrior, then your job is to grow those muscles.
Okay.
If you're a natural brave warrior, as you grow, you're going to need to grow considered architect muscles. So it's not are entrepreneurs or brave warriors. The question is, what style of leadership do you need to lean into at these different stages? Okay. So when you're launching, you need to grow bravery.
Okay. So let's talk about the bravery muscles then. So before this recording, and I'll say it now for the purposes of the recording as well, that probably the slowness initially of my development was a lack of confidence in what I was doing, about whether I could succeed or not. How should I and listeners, perhaps who feel that they're a bit light on those bravery muscles, go about developing them?
There's so many ways you could answer that question. Let's look at what we mean by bravery. So bravery is where, if you take it right back to basics, all human behavior is motivated only by two things: the avoidance of pain/fear, or the pursuit of pleasure/aspiration. So if you think of a seesaw or balance scales, and you've got fear on one side and you've got aspiration on the other, all the time that fear is bigger than aspiration, you won't move. So there's two things you can do. You can turn the volume up on aspiration, or you can find ways to reduce the volume on fear. So, for example, if you wanted to look at improving aspiration, things like really building a compelling and exciting vision of the future, a three-dimensional, multicolored vision of the business you want to create and why it's important to you. So really kind of key in the motivation and the reason why. And that just dials up the positive motivation. Other things you can do on that side are small things to test yourself. Our fit, our comfort zone gets bigger when we stretch it. The other thing that I would always say is hang out with other winners, because confidence is catching. And when you can see how other people have just, if I'm going to try and climb a mountain, I'm not going to try and climb it on my own. I'm going to find people who've successfully climbed the mountain before and watch them and say, how do they do that? Because having a greater idea of how other people are succeeding builds my confidence and my aspiration. On the other side, what can you do to reduce fear? It's such a huge topic. So because fear can come from so many different places. So if you know that you're holding a negative belief about yourself, the best way to dismantle a belief is to flood it with evidence to its contrary. So you can do a belief inventory, and you can sit there and you can say, what are all the negative beliefs that are kind of running around? Like, I think people won't want it. I think I won't be good enough. I think the market's over-serviced already. And actually take each one of those as a hypothesis and challenge it. I think I won't be good enough. Okay, well, what's all the evidence that I can be good at this, that I have achieved success before? What feedback do I have from other people that I've been good? Or I don't, I won't succeed because I'll make mistakes. Well, okay, let's challenge that. So it might be like, for example, if you ask me to do a waltz, it's not a fear that I'm going to get it wrong. It's a certainty, because I've never learned to waltz. So I could say it's a fear, or I could just go and learn how to waltz. So, for example, the typical things that people thinking inside their own business are scared of are selling, networking. They're the two big ones, to be really honest with you. Those are the big, scary ones. And then there's other smaller things like building a website, building a product. But it's the sales and networking, probably in that order, that terrify people the most. If you've never read a book like To Sell is Human by Dan Pink, if you don't understand the process that you need to take people through from having never met you before to hiring you, you're going to do a bad waltz. So, are there skills you need to develop? Is your fear really not a fear? It's just an absence of a skill. So what skills do you need to learn to reduce the fear? And then, some of that classic accountability stuff works really well as well. So, in my early days, I would have a buddy and we were both at the same stage of business, and we would, all the things we were procrastinating on, because all procrastination is fear is bigger than aspiration. And we would spend half a day on the phone to each other. And I would say, right, I'm going to make these 5 phone calls. I'm going to send these 4 emails. I'm going to do this. And then we'd get off the phone and we'd have to do it and then report back to each other. So having a buddy who can hold you accountable, having a mentor where you can call and say, how do you do this? Having a coach who's going to kick your butt or give you a cuddle, either way, metaphorically. So, but I think at its core, it's about increasing the passion, the motivation, and the vision and the purpose on the one hand, and decreasing the fear either by challenging the beliefs or by building the skill or by building the support and the accountability on the other side.
Okay, that's a brilliant answer. I love that analogy of sort of fear versus sort of aspiration and the balance between the two, which is probably put it probably very, very clearly in a way that I don't think we've had before on this show. So that's really helpful. What about this second stream that we were talking about in terms of scaling up, the business? Now you've sort of alluded to sort of these various stages of development and so on. But are there fear and aspiration routes to those as well, or are these just like a completely separate set of?
All behavior is fear and aspiration.
Okay.
All behavior at its core, that's it. I mean, it really, you could boil all psychology down to we avoid pain and we pursue pleasure. That's all it is. So let's be straight. For 90% of people who decide to leave their job and work for themselves, what we've just talked about and the startup phase is really all they'll need to master. So that's all I needed to master. I kept myself in that phase. So I had me, maybe one associate, and then a PA. And I was really, I did that for 17 years and it was a great life. I had very nice salary, nice holidays, enjoyed my work. If you make the decision that you want to build a business and you need to move into that second stage of considered architect, there are a variety of things it's going to require of you. The first thing is it's going to require you to be quite self-aware and be really thoughtful about your impact on the people that you're working with. And so there are a whole set of skills in the architect phase you need to learn. You do need to learn how to hire, onboard, coach, delegate, run team meetings, build product, build services, think about a go-to-market strategy, hire people who are smarter than you to do certain things. And you will have to do quite a lot of things that don't come naturally. If you are a brave warrior and you've got to the point where you're building a business, there are a lot of things that you won't enjoy. And so you have to find what I call a minimally viable way of doing it. So most founders who've decided to scale their businesses say something like this: oh, I'm a very good warrior. I'll love being a monarch. I don't want to do this architect thing. I hire a COO. And then they hire a COO and then they blow through the business like a tornado. They don't show up to team meetings. They don't set their own goals. They don't set OKRs. They don't hold people to account. They don't give feedback. So at that stage, you can delegate as much of the operational management as possible, but you will still have to manage your team and you will still have to give feedback to your team and you will still have to help the COO with the operational pieces. So now we come to the pain pleasure of that. Most founders will say, oh, I don't want to do that. Yeah. And then when you talk to them, what's frustrating them is that if you try to warrior through a scale up, you are going to spend 90% of your time dealing with people problems because you're not giving the people who work for you what they need to be successful in role. So you will run away and go and do the fun things that you like. And back home, all these problems will exist within the office and you'll have people trying to triangulate with you and sidebar conversations and people being disenfranchised and people leaving. And so the trick with entrepreneurial founders who need to become architects that seems to work quite well is when they recognize that if they engage in minimally viable architecting, which is probably about a day and a half to 2 days a month of team meetings, employee reviews, showing up to weekly huddles. If they put that effort in, they're probably going to reduce the time they're wasting in their mind on people problems from 90% to 50%. At that point, they say, oh, okay, so 2 days misery for 2 weeks gain. Great, I'll do that.
Right. And do you ever have to say to a warrior who's a would-be architect, you're never going to make it, you're never going to make that transition? Or do you believe in the art of the possible, that it's in everybody to be an architect if they really want to?
So first of all, no one has ever wanted to be an architect.
Right.
What they want me to be able to do is find a magic bullet that means they don't have to do the operational stuff, because it's not what they want to do.
Yeah.
So the question of the art of the possible, I think of it slightly differently. Obviously you want to play to your strengths in whatever walk of life you're at, but particularly as a founder, and trying to make somebody who's a great salesperson into an ops manager would be an absolute waste of their superpowers and make them and the rest of the business really unhappy. So I don't think it's binary. I don't think it's, oh, you'll never make it or you must be it. I think it's that the analogy that I use is, if you're 7'7" and you want to play professional sport, you're better off trying to be a basketball player than a jockey. If you're 5'5", you're better off trying to be a jockey than a basketball player. So in your choice of role and focus, play to your strengths. However, if the team needs you to ride a horse or shoot a hoop, you need to be able to do both. So that's why there's this idea of minimally viable architect. So have enough skills that you can give your leadership team, particularly what they need to go away and run the business for you. And every founder has the ability to do that. For some, it's really difficult, but every founder has the ability to do that. And I think, honestly, every business is better when the founder learns to do that, rather than try to abdicate it to this poor little chief of staff somewhere who doesn't have the authority to make anything really work.
So will we, I mean, like, I'm trying to think of a typical example of, where it might start to go wrong. I mean, I immediately thought of an example of, you give somebody a task to do in the business or delegate an area of authority. And as the founder or the warrior, you're not seeing it being done the way you would want it to be done. And so you say, give it back to me. I might as well have done it myself. I mean, that's a classic example where it goes wrong.
Classic problem. And actually, if you look at that, what that's actually a function of is either the quality of the thinking about who you wanted to hire wasn't good enough. So you hadn't really, and sometimes you can't get it right, but you hadn't really thought about what is exactly the role that I want filled, and what are the objectives and key results that individual is responsible for delivering. What kind of strengths do I need this hire to have? And how can I make sure I'm hiring for the strengths and for the right match? So there's a lot that needs to happen in hiring. Even if you find the right person for that role, you then need to onboard them really effectively. So you need to spend time with them, understanding the culture, the context, the background, how you work, what's important to you. And you need to set that person up for success when they join the business. You need to chat with them and agree what success looks like in 90 days. And for the first 90 days, you need to be meeting and reviewing progress every 30 days. You need to be really good at giving them feedback about things that are working, but also things that aren't working. And if you can't do any of that, all you'll do is what I call the hire and hope approach, which is actually more like hire, hope, get annoyed, get very annoyed, take the job back, fire them approach. Yeah. So a lot of self-employed people or scaling founders just don't recognize the role they play in setting up people to succeed. And there's a lot for the founder to do in making that journey successful for new staff.
Okay, I want to get onto the book in a second, the Founder's Survival Guide. But in terms of running your own business, I mean, you mentioned already that, you're a good warrior, you're kind of pretty good architect, you're not really a monarch. But is that how would you describe your, maybe your biggest faults yourself in running your business? And do you have triggers that help you through your own coaching skills recognize when you're going slightly off track and how to get yourself back on again?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I am, like I said, recovering warrior. I still love warrioring, by the way. It's still my favorite place to be, which is like jump in, take action, win business, hit things with a hammer, just make stuff happen. That's my favorite space. And I have to work quite hard to keep in mind, how are the team? Have I communicated with the team? What do the team need? Have I said I have to do that on purpose. It doesn't come naturally. My biggest failings, I'm not going to call it failings. My weakest leadership muscles are around the monarch, the strategic. So if you think about those 3 stages, the warrior at startup, the architect at scale up, and the monarch at grown up, you could also call them tactical, operational, and strategic. Or you could say that the warrior thinks of what to do, the architect thinks of how to do it, how to plan it, and then the monarch asks the question, are we doing the right thing? And very regularly in our team meetings, you'll hear me list off a reel of things we've got to do on LinkedIn, and we've got to do here, and we've got to do there, and we've got to do this, and we've got to do that, we've got to do this. And my business partner, Kevin, will be quite quiet, and then he'll say, and why? And the impact of that and is that where our efforts need to be? And I'll sort of deflate like a souffle in the oven and just sort of think, no, of course it's not what we should be doing. So those are I've got overdeveloped warrior muscles, relatively strong architect muscles, and quite weak monarch muscles.
Okay. Let's talk about the book. I mean, did you write it because, and I came across this book because I was a judge in the Business Book Awards, and I wasn't judging your category, but I noticed it, so when they do the shortlisted bits on the awards night, and I was thinking, that looks quite interesting. And it kind of stayed with me. But was your motive in that to bring together all the knowledge and wisdom that you had to that point? Or was it because you thought that founders need a way to survive? Was there a specific focus for you, or was it just a collection of all your knowledge to date, and it became the Founders Survival? I was interested in how these things emerged, whether the idea that you ended up with was the idea that you started with or not.
The idea I ended up with was the idea I started with, but I didn't think about it very strategically. Just because I'm not a very good monarch. Yeah. When we first launched, we were having lots of conversations with venture capital companies, and we'd have very good initial conversations, but we didn't seem to stick. And so I remember saying, and I'd just written a series of articles for LinkedIn the year before, which were sort of 52 tips to, become a successful founder or something. And I think initially I just thought, oh, well, I'll stick them all together. And then, of course, 2 years later, I'm still writing the 9th edit and thinking, why on earth did I start this? So I think it started sort of tactically for the business of having something that would keep us quite sticky with VCs. That was one motivation. I think the other motivation is that there are a series. So the half of the book is a toolbox. So the back of the book is literally, if you need to give feedback to member of staff, do this. If you need to run a good team meeting, do that. If you need to prepare for a public speech, do this. If you need to understand why you're so scared, look at this. If you need to understand, so it really is a toolbox. And those are the tools that I use all the time with founders. And so having it all in one place rather than saying, oh, let me send you something or have a look at this or, read this bit. So yeah, that was the initial motivation. Of course, by the time the book actually launched, we were quite sticky with VCs and didn't need the book for that reason anymore. So we had to scale really quickly and scrabble to bring on a team who could do the delivery afterwards. So classic scale up challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. By the way, I downloaded the audio book version. So, I find that it's really interesting when you listen to audiobooks, particularly, listeners will not be aware, but I'll tell them anyway that you are yourself narrating it. And I love the narration because whereas many people who are narrating their own books sound like they're in a hostage video or something. You are really putting the intonation into what you're reading. You're reading it with some joy, I think. I mean, this is certainly. I'm in the first half of the book at the moment. I don't know whether it tails off, but I really feel it kind of. You just hear the passion coming through. Not all people who are reading their own books seem to be able to do that after a while. Was that? But not everybody does an audio book. I mean, was that a labor of love, or did you find that quite a tricky thing to do? Just out of my own interest.
The interesting thing is, officially, it launches next week.
Yeah. Oh, well, I've got the audio.
I know, because it's on the platforms. But the difficult thing with the audiobook, just for anyone who ever does an audiobook, is it takes Audible about 5 months to load it on the platform.
Oh, really?
So the audiobook was done last December. And I primarily did the audiobook because most founders are too busy to read a whole book.
Yeah.
And they like multitasking, and they would like to listen to it while they're running, or listen to it while they're driving or traveling.
Yeah.
But I know I loved recording the audiobook.
Yeah.
But then if you do my psychometrics, and look at my traits, I'm very high on inspirational and influencing communication style, but I love talking with people.
Yeah. Well, it comes across very, very, very sort of clearly in listening to it. So, congratulations! And it was shortlisted for a Business Book Award. So that all helps. So I mean, just to sort of round off on this, I mean, we want to give listeners the confidence they need to succeed. Maybe if we focus on the first group of people that we were talking about, those who are literally just starting on their journey. I mean, I know it's an impossible question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. I mean, what advice would you give to individuals starting their own businesses? I mean, is there a sort of little checklist, that they need to go through in order to even put the first sort of baby steps on that road?
So there's a whole question about tactical things, and you can boil that all down to very simply, before you can even go out into if you're going to have a business, you need something you are selling. So to really, and what a lot of people make the mistake of doing is, when you're selling something, you talk all about your product. And that's the number one sales mistake people make. So when you're talking to people about the service you offer, you need to understand that, a lot of coaches will say things like, I'm a sounding board for my client's success. And I think, what client is lying in bed going, oh my God, the problem is I don't have a sounding board for my success. What they're saying is, I'm stressed, I'm burnt out. Why won't these people do what I want them to do? I don't think I can do this. So, you've got to put yourself in your ideal client's shoes. So ask yourself, who do you want to work with, and what's keeping them up at night? And how is the thing you want to do a solution to the problems they're facing? And then go and talk about the problems that you solve and the benefits that people get as a result of working with you. The sounding board, the how you do that, that'll be interesting to them way down the line. So, I would always start every business with one page which says, who do I want to work? Who am I working with? Who are my ideal clients? What are the problems that they have? What aspirations will they achieve? So go back to the pain and pleasure. What are the problems that I'm going to help them solve? And what are the benefits they're going to get as a result of working with me? And only then just say a couple of lines about how you do that better than other people. And then that's number one. Number two, it's all about your network in the first stage. And I don't mean going to networking events, because in my experience, particularly breakfast networking events are just full of terrified people who don't want to be there, talking to other terrified people who don't want to be there about services that aren't very good because they're not selling them. Because if they were good, they'd be too busy to go to networking breakfast events. Yeah. So, I mean, who do you know who knows people who might be in your ideal target market? So, for example, when we launched VC Talent Lab, we went through every single person we knew on LinkedIn and said, are they working in a venture capital company? Do they know people working in a venture capital company? Would they introduce us to someone working in a venture capital company? And then we approached, and we did it as market research. We said, we're launching this business. Can we come and talk to you about some of the leadership problems you see and what you would want from a company like this? So great. There's no sale there. But of course, they then kind of go, yeah, we need that. Yeah. So that's the kind of the go-to-market strategy, if you like. On the other side, which is the building the personal resilience, over and above what we said about dialing up the passion and the vision, two things. Number one, hang out with the winners. And I would say that in almost every walk of life. Find people who are inspiring and exciting and find ways to hang out with them. And, not in a kind of like, please, sir, can you show me what you're doing? But just, like this conversation, that's what you're doing with podcasts. You're surrounding yourself with people who are winning in this game, which is great. Mm. So build relationships with people who are winning. One of the things that I've always done is I will offer my work for free for 3 months. If I'm trying to break into a large organization or a large sector or build my network. And we did this with VC Talent Lab. We went to a big fund and we said, this is what we do. Give us someone in your ecosystem, either an investor or a founder. We'll work with them for free for 3 months. And if they like the service and they find it valuable, you can become a referral source. And that way we got to really spend time with some of these really big funds, great investors, great founders. So yeah, volunteer, go and spend the day with them, hang out, just to find a way to hang out with people winning.
That's brilliant, brilliant advice. I relate to all of that. I mean, in terms of my business journey, I've sort of, the way you've described it just there is that my network, I wasn't directly selling, but I was just asking them about what were the challenges they face. And then I invented solutions that help them sort of find that. And it just seemed like obvious to me.
That's called sales, by the way. What you've just described sales. But people think that sales is standing up and telling you how great we are. It isn't. It's tell me what your problems are. Here's how I'll help you fix it. That's sales.
Absolutely. And before that, when I was in employment, I had this idea that sales was something quite different. It was to sort of open your jacket and sort of have a bunch of watches that you were selling, and somebody then said to me, you're never going to sell like that. You're going to sell through your knowledge and experience and helping to solve people's problems.
Here's a helpful one for people if they like it. I spent 10 years running a program called Life Pitch, which is about how to sell. And the formula that I would use is great sales equals, and this is actually in the book as well, hate saying that, equals curiosity plus a desire to be of service plus a passion for your product. Now, the interesting thing is that we tend to think of salespeople as being passionate about their product first, and then curious and helpful second. But it's the other way around. It's 70% curiosity and asking great questions. And then it's 15% being helpful and 15% believing in what you're selling.
Brilliant. Okay, final question for you. What are you up to now? Now you've got the book out of the way, and I've written, a few books myself, and I know what a massive commitment it is. Now that that's done, what are you up to now and next? Is there anything that you're working on that you want to talk about or you're particularly excited about? There's always something on the bubble, isn't there? So
I think writing books might be like having children, though. In the middle of labor, you think, I'm never doing this again. And then a couple of years later, the pain of birth has disappeared and you're just remembering how cute they were when they first, put them in a baby grow. And then suddenly it looks like a good idea because the idea of a second book is beginning to look like quite good fun. And a year ago, I decided I'd never do it again. So the focus for this year and next year is really about scaling the business. So we've pulled together a great team of founder coaches who work with founders right the way from I want to start a business right the way through to our biggest founder is a decacorn. I don't know if you know what a decacorn is. Nope. So a unicorn is a privately owned company that's been valued at more than £1 billion. And a decacorn is a privately owned company that's been valued at more than 10 billion.
Wow.
So we have everything from individual founders just starting the journey right the way up to companies worth multiple billion. And we've got a great team, all with different superpowers. And we're launching a kind of matching service later on this year where people will be able to go on the website and just by looking at their stage of growth and the challenges that they're facing and their budget, be able to pick the people who'd be right for them. So I'm excited about that. And then I think the next book I'll probably start work on the next book about autumn next year with a view to having it out the following autumn.
So there's another book on the way. I'm looking forward to that, and I'm happy to recommend the first book for sure. I love so many things about what Rachel said. Surround yourself with winners, different stages of entrepreneurial growth, the warrior, architect and monarch thing she was talking about, and what she called the fear versus aspiration seesaw that you need to get over to get things moving. I really hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, so thank you very much, Rachel, for your time. And thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's episode, we'd love for you to subscribe, rate and review through your usual podcast provider. And if you want to find out more about the Merri-Cast or our business Merribourne Media, you can find us on LinkedIn. Don't forget to join us for our next episode. And until then, thanks for listening.